Two racist deputies mock a black man on trial, laughing, bragging, sure he's nothing but trouble. He sits perfectly still, hands folded, recording every word with a tiny hidden camera. He isn't who they think. He's undercover. He has the power to shut them down. They boast about planting evidence, about taking down a beloved teacher who dared to question their budget. The room thinks this is just another routine arrest. The truth is a live wire. Expose them now, and he can save one life. But tip them off, and the whole corruption network disappears. Wait, and he could bring the entire rotten system to its knees. What do you do when saving one person could cost justice for dozens? Reveal yourself, or finish the plan. The cold metal bench bit through Marcus Freeman's cheap suit pants. He sat perfectly still in the Magnolia County holding cell, hands resting loose in his lap, eyes fixed on a point somewhere in the middle distance. The stench hit him in waves. Old sweat, industrial disinfectant, desperation that had soaked into concrete over decades. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, their harsh glare washing everything in shades of sickly yellow. He was the first black director of the FBI in the nation's history. Right now, he was James Washington, unemployed factory worker, traffic violator, nobody. Marcus took a slow breath through his nose. His fingers brushed the second button on his shirt, the one that wasn't actually a button at all. The tiny camera and microphone inside would capture everything in crystal-clear detail. Every word, every gesture, every moment of what was about to unfold. The cell door buzzed, metal scraped against metal, the sound sharp enough to make his jaw tighten. Two white men in sheriff's deputy uniforms swaggered through. The first one was broad-shouldered, with a crew cut, and the kind of swagger that came from never being challenged. His nameplate read Carver. The second was leaner, with thinning hair and cold eyes. Dawson. Shane Carver stopped a few feet away, thumbs hooked in his belt. A slow smile spread across his face. Well, well, James Washington. He drawled the name like it was something distasteful. "You comfortable in there, boy?" Marcus didn't respond. He'd learned long ago that silence was its own kind of power. Rick Dawson chuckled, a mean sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Silent type, huh? That's fine. You'll talk when the judge asks you to." "If he can talk proper English," Carver added. His partner laughed. Marcus kept his breathing even, his heart rate steady. This was why he was here. This was what the investigation needed. Proof so clear, so undeniable that no jury, no judge, no defense attorney could explain it away. Carver stepped closer, his boots scuffing the concrete. "You know what I think, Rick? I think old James here thought he was real smart. Thought he could just drive through our county, do whatever he wanted." Dawson pulled out a small notepad, flipping through pages like he was bored. "Says here he was doing 47 and a 35, failed to signal, and..." He paused, eyebrows raising in mock surprise. "Resisted when asked to step out of the vehicle." Marcus's jaw tightened. That last part was a lie. They both knew it. The entire stop had been manufactured, every detail carefully staged by the FBI to give Marcus a reason to be in their system. But the resisting charge, that was new. That was them adding to the story. "That right, James?" Carver leaned down, his face inches away. His breath smelled like coffee and cigarettes. "You resist arrest?" "No, sir," Marcus said quietly. "I did exactly what I was told." "No, sir," Dawson mimicked in a high-pitched voice. "Listen to him, Shane. Polite as can be." His expression hardened. "But the paperwork says different. And paperwork don't lie." Carver straightened, pulling a pen from his pocket. "We're going to need to update your file, James. Make sure everything's accurate for the judge." Marcus watched as Carver scrawled something on a form attached to his clipboard. The angle was wrong for the camera to catch the exact words, but it didn't matter. The audio would capture their voices. The intent was clear. "You got anything to say for yourself?" Carver asked, not looking up. "Just that I'm innocent," Marcus said. He kept his voice level, respectful. I wasn't speeding. I signaled, and I cooperated completely. Dawson snorted. They all say that. Your type especially, Carver added, capping his pen with a sharp click. Always got some excuse. Always somebody else's fault. The words hung in the air like poison. Marcus felt the familiar burn in his chest. Anger, frustration, grief for every person who'd sat where he sat now, who'd heard these same words but had no badge, no backup, no way out. But he had a mission, and the mission required patience. I understand you're just doing your job, Marcus said carefully. Carver's eyes narrowed. Damn right we are, and our job is keeping criminals off the street. He tapped his clipboard. Criminals like you. Funny thing, Dawson said, moving to lean against the cell bars. We've had a lot of your people coming through here lately. Educated types. Think they're better than everybody else. Think the rules don't apply, Carver agreed. Marcus said nothing. The recorder captured every word. Dawson pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. Got a teacher coming in later today, actually. Grace Robinson. You know her? Marcus's pulse spiked, but his face stayed neutral. No, sir. Real uppity, Dawson continued. Wrote some letter to the county commissioners. Questions about police funding, police conduct. He shook his head. Found meth in her car yesterday during a routine stop. 2 ounces. The lie was so casual, so practiced. Marcus's hands curled into fists in his lap. Shame, Carver said, though his tone suggested he felt anything but. Pretty girl like that, but you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. They both laughed. Marcus closed his eyes for a brief moment. Somewhere in this building, federal agents were monitoring the feed from his camera. They were documenting every word, every illegal action. But they couldn't intervene. Not yet. The investigation was bigger than one arrest, bigger than these 2 deputies. It stretched into the bail bond system, the private prisons, the county administration itself. But knowing that didn't make it easier. All right, James. Carver grabbed him roughly by the arm, hauling him to his feet. Time to face the music. The handcuffs bit into Marcus's wrists as Dawson clicked them tight, tighter than necessary. He stumbled slightly as they pushed him toward the door. Watch your step, Dawson said with mock concern. Wouldn't want you to fall. They walked through a maze of hallways, all beige concrete and flickering lights. Other deputies passed them, some nodding at Carver and Dawson, others looking away. The sound of their footsteps echoed off the walls. Marcus's mind raced through the plan. Jennifer Chen would be in the courtroom, playing her role as an overworked public defender. She had the real evidence. Dashcam footage from a neighboring county that proved Marcus's innocence on the traffic charges. Judge Holbrook, from everything they'd learned, was fair-minded. She'd dismiss the case, but then what? Ahead, the double doors to the courtroom loomed. Through the narrow windows, Marcus could see people filling the benches, some defendants, some family members, some just citizens fulfilling jury duty. And somewhere in that room was Jennifer, ready to spring the trap. Carver paused at the door, his hand on Marcus's shoulder. One more thing, James. You thinking about making any trouble in there? You just remember, we know where you live, we know where you work, or where you used to work anyway. He smiled. We're always watching. Understood, Marcus said quietly. The doors swung open. The murmur of conversation died down as people turned to look. Marcus's eyes swept the room in a practiced sweep. Exits, security, potential threats. And then, for just a fraction of a second, his gaze locked with a small Asian woman sitting at the defense table, surrounded by stacks of files and looking thoroughly overwhelmed. Jennifer Chen, his partner, his backup. She gave no sign of recognition. Perfect. At the front of the courtroom, Judge Patricia Holbrook sat behind the bench, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, her expression weary but alert. She was reviewing a file, her reading glasses perched on her nose. The bailiff stepped forward. All rise. The courtroom stood. Judge Holbrook looked up, surveying the room with the kind of exhaustion that came from seeing the same injustices play out day after day, year after year. She picked up her gavel. The crack of wood against wood split the air like thunder. "Calling the next case," Judge Holbrook said, her voice filling every corner of the room. "The State versus James Washington." The courtroom felt smaller than it should. Marcus kept his eyes forward as Jennifer Chen stood, fumbling with a stack of papers that scattered across the defense table. She muttered an apology and bent to retrieve them, playing her role perfectly, an overworked, underprepared public defender who'd barely had time to review her client's file. Judge Holbrook peered over her reading glasses. "Are you ready to proceed, Counselor?" "Yes, Your Honor," Jennifer said, her voice carrying just the right note of frazzled determination. "If I may approach." The prosecutor, a bored-looking man in his 50s named Dale Simmons, waved dismissively. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward traffic violation. The defendant failed to signal, then became belligerent when stopped. The arresting officer's testimony is clear." Marcus watched Shane Carver lean back in his chair at the prosecutor's table, arms crossed. The deputy's smirk was almost a permanent fixture on his face now. Rick Dawson sat beside him, occasionally glancing at Marcus with that same contempt he'd shown in the holding cell. "Your Honor," Jennifer said, steadying her voice, "I'd like to present dashcam footage from the patrol vehicle involved in the traffic stop." Dale Simmons sat up straighter. "What footage? There's nothing in discovery about—" "The department provided it to my office late yesterday," Jennifer interrupted, pulling a tablet from her briefcase. "My paralegal found it buried in the digital evidence locker. It appears it was misfiled." That was a lie, of course. The FBI's tech team had found it by accessing the county's poorly secured server. But it was authentic footage, pulled from Deputy Carver's own patrol car. Judge Holbrook gestured. "Let's see it." Jennifer connected the tablet to the courtroom's display system. The screen flickered to life, showing the dashboard view from inside a patrol car. Marcus could see himself driving his rental sedan along a quiet county road, his turn signal clearly visible as he changed lanes. Shane Carver's smirk vanished. The footage played without sound at first, just Marcus driving carefully, staying within the speed limit, using his signals properly. Then came the moment of the stop. The patrol car's lights flashed. Marcus pulled over immediately, hands visible on the steering wheel. Jennifer turned up the audio. "License and registration," Shane's voice came through, sharp and aggressive. "Yes, sir." Marcus's recorded voice was calm, respectful. "May I ask why I was stopped?" "You failed to signal back there." "I believe I did signal, officer. But here's my license and registration." There was a long pause on the recording. Then Shane's voice again, harder. "Step out of the vehicle." "May I ask why?" "Step out of the vehicle, boy. Don't make me ask again." Several people in the courtroom gallery shifted uncomfortably. Judge Holbrook's expression remained neutral, but her pen moved faster across her notepad. The footage showed Marcus complying, moving slowly and deliberately. Shane circled him like a predator. "You got a smart mouth." "No, sir, I'm just trying to understand." "Hands behind your back. You're under arrest for failure to signal and resisting arrest." "I haven't resisted." The audio captured Shane's laugh. "You're resisting, right now. Talking back. That's resisting in my book." Judge Holbrook held up her hand. "That's sufficient. Miss Chen, did the defendant in fact signal?" "The footage clearly shows he did, Your Honor. Twice, once when changing lanes, once when pulling over." Dale Simmons was flipping through papers frantically. Shane Carver had gone pale, his jaw clenched tight. Rick Dawson stared at the table. "Your Honor," Jennifer continued, "my client was arrested without cause, subjected to verbal harassment, and charged with crimes he did not commit. I move for immediate dismissal of all charges." Judge Holbrook removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. She looked tired, old. But when she spoke, Her voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen this pattern before and was weary of it. "Mr. Simmons, do you have any evidence contradicting this footage?" The prosecutor shuffled his papers. "Your Honor, the officer's testimony is contradicted by their own dash cam," the judge said. She turned to Marcus. "Mr. Washington, please stand." Marcus rose, his cheap suit pulled at the shoulders. "I apologize for wasting your time," Judge Holbrook said, and there was something in her eyes, a flash of genuine regret, maybe even shame. "All charges are dismissed. You're free to go." Relief washed through the gallery. Marcus heard someone whisper, "Thank you, Jesus." But he felt no triumph. Not yet. "Furthermore," the judge continued, her gaze shifting to Shane and Rick, "I'm ordering a review of all arrests made by Deputies Carver and Dawson over the past 6 months. Bailiff, please ensure that order is filed with the county administrator by end of business today." Shane's chair scraped as he stood. "Your Honor, that's—" "Sit down, Deputy." Judge Holbrook's voice cracked like a whip. "Or I'll hold you in contempt." Shane sat, but his face was flushed with rage. Marcus gathered the few belongings they'd returned to him. His wallet, his keys. Jennifer caught his eye and gave the slightest nod. Mission accomplished. They had everything on record now. Shane's lies, his aggression, his casual racism, all captured, all documented. As Marcus turned to leave, he heard Shane mutter under his breath, "This ain't over." Rick Dawson leaned close to his partner. "Shut up. Not here." Marcus walked slowly toward the exit, every instinct screaming at him to turn around, to confront them, to reveal who he really was. But he kept moving. The mission was bigger than one moment of personal satisfaction. He stepped into the hallway, breathing the stale courthouse air. Other defendants and their families moved past him, their faces etched with worry and exhaustion. This building processed dozens of cases every day. How many were like his? How many innocent people had stood where he'd stood, without the resources or the luck to find exonerating evidence? Jennifer emerged a few minutes later, still playing her role. She shook his hand formally. "Congratulations, Mr. Washington. Stay out of trouble." "Thank you, ma'am." She walked away, and Marcus headed toward the clerk's office to complete his release paperwork. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A water fountain dripped somewhere down the hall. He was signing the last form when he heard voices. Shane and Rick just around the corner, thinking they were alone. "That teacher's hearing is up next," Rick said. "Think we got any problems?" Shane snorted. "Nah, we got her dead to rights. Found the meth in her car, didn't we?" "Yeah, but nothing. She fits the profile. Educated, mouthy, wrote that letter to the commissioners about our budget. She made herself a target." Marcus's pen froze on the paper. "Her lawyer's some kid fresh out of law school," Shane continued. "Public defender's office is so backed up, he probably hasn't even read her file. This'll be quick." They walked past without seeing Marcus, their boots echoing on the tile floor. His hands trembled as he finished signing. Grace Robinson. The name echoed in his mind. The woman they'd mentioned in the holding cell, the one they'd bragged about taking care of. She was here, right now. He walked to the clerk's window and slid the forms across. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, stamped them without looking up. "You're all set, Mr. Washington. You have a good day now. Thank you." He turned toward the exit. The doors stood open, sunlight streaming through. Freedom. Justice, at least for him. He could walk out right now, return to his team, and begin building the case that would bring down Shane Carver, Rick Dawson, and everyone connected to their corruption. But then the main courthouse doors opened and Marcus's breath caught in his throat. 2 deputies, not Shane and Rick, but their colleagues, escorted a young black woman in handcuffs. She was small, maybe 5'3", wearing a modest skirt and blouse that looked like teaching clothes. Her face was streaked with tears. A young lawyer in an ill-fitting suit rushed beside her, whispering urgently, but she seemed barely able to hear him. Her eyes were wide with terror. "Grace, listen to me," the lawyer pleaded. "We're going to request bail, okay? I've got your mother lined up as surety." "My mother has Alzheimer's," Grace whispered, her voice breaking. "She doesn't understand what's happening." "I know, but on paper. I didn't do this. I've never touched drugs in my life. I teach Sunday school. Her voice dissolved into sobs. They passed, within 10 feet of Marcus. He could see her hands shaking in the cuffs, could see the desperation in every line of her body. The lawyer noticed Marcus staring. "Can I help you?" Marcus shook his head, unable to speak. They continued toward the courtroom. Grace stumbled, and the deputy yanked her upright with unnecessary force. She cried out softly. Every fiber of Marcus's being screamed at him to do something, to reveal himself, to use his authority and his power to stop this travesty right now, this instant, before it went 1 second further. But he stood frozen, the weight of his decision pressing down like a physical force. If he revealed himself now, he'd save Grace. Absolutely. Without question. But Shane and Rick would scatter. Their conspirators would destroy evidence. The bail bondsman, the county administrator, the private prison contacts, the entire network would vanish like smoke. 17 people. That's how many victims his team had identified so far. 17 lives destroyed by this system, and Grace would make 18. If he waited, if he gathered the evidence, if he built the unshakable case, he could bring them all down. He could dismantle the entire corrupt apparatus. He could ensure this never happened to anyone again. He let the deputies pass, clenched his jaw, and walked out, not toward immediate confrontation, but toward the long fight that would bring them to justice. The morning sun filtered through the grimy windows of the Magnolia County Community Center, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Marcus pushed open the heavy front door and stepped inside, the familiar scent of old books and fresh paint greeting him like an old friend. A week had passed since he'd walked out of that courthouse a free man. 7 days of living in a cramped room at the state-run halfway house on Birch Street, where the walls were thin and the mattress sagged in the middle. 7 days of building his cover as James Washington, a man trying to get his life back together after a brush with the law. "You hear about the volunteer position?" A woman's voice called from behind a cluttered desk. She was in her 60s, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, her dark eyes warm but tired. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said, approaching with his hands in his pockets. "I'm James Washington. I heard you folks needed help." She studied him for a moment, then her face softened. "I'm Gladys Mitchell. I run this place, or at least I try to." She gestured around the center where paint peeled from the walls and outdated computers sat on mismatched tables. "We can always use an extra pair of hands, especially now." Marcus knew what she meant. Grace Robinson had been one of the center's brightest lights, teaching art classes to children every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Her absence had left a void that no one could fill. "I heard about Miss Robinson," Marcus said quietly. "Terrible thing." Gladys's eyes glistened. "That girl is innocent. Everybody knows it. She's been coming here for 5 years, pouring her heart into these kids. She wouldn't touch drugs if her life depended on it." She paused, shaking her head. "But what can we do? Those officers say they found something in her car, and that's that." Marcus felt the familiar weight settle in his chest. Maybe there's more to the story. Maybe. Gladys didn't sound convinced. "But folks like us don't usually get to tell our side, do we?" She handed him a clipboard with a volunteer application. As he filled it out with his alias information, children began trickling into the center. They were young, most between 7 and 12, their backpacks dragging on the floor as they called out to Gladys. "After-school program," she explained. "Used to be Grace's domain. Now we're all just doing our best." Marcus spent the afternoon sorting donated books and helping kids with homework. He listened more than he spoke, letting the community's stories wash over him. Every conversation, every casual mention of Grace, painted a clearer picture of the woman whose life hung in the balance. "Miss Grace let me paint whatever I wanted," a girl named Tamika said, clutching a worn paintbrush like a treasure. "She said art comes from the heart, not from rules." An older boy named Deshaun added, "She helped my mom fill out forms when my dad got sick. Stayed at our house till midnight making sure everything was right." The stories piled up. Grace tutoring students for free. Grace organizing food drives. Grace standing up at county meetings to question why the police budget kept growing while school funding shrank. That last detail made Marcus's jaw tighten. As the afternoon stretched toward evening, Gladys pulled him aside. "There's someone I want you to meet," she said. "Grace's mother, Dorothy. She's having a good day, and she's been asking about the center." They walked 3 blocks to a small house with a tidy garden out front. The paint was faded but loved. The porch swept clean. Gladys knocked twice and let herself in. "Miss Dorothy, it's Gladys. I brought a new volunteer to meet you." The woman who emerged from the back bedroom moved slowly, leaning on a cane, but her eyes were sharp and clear, taking Marcus's measure with the precision of someone who'd spent a lifetime reading people. Dorothy Robinson was in her 70s, her hair a crown of silver, her posture regal despite the slight tremor in her hands. She wore a simple blue dress and a cross around her neck that caught the light. "James Washington, ma'am," Marcus said, extending his hand. "It's an honor." She took his hand, and her grip was surprisingly strong. "You have kind eyes," she said, "but sad ones. What brings you to our little corner of Mississippi?" "Just trying to help where I can." Dorothy gestured for them to sit. The living room was filled with photographs. Dorothy marching with signs in the 1960s, standing shoulder to shoulder with other activists. Grace as a child, beaming in a graduation gown. Grace teaching her first art class. "Gladys tells me you've been helping at the center," Dorothy said. "That's Grace's heart and soul, that place." "Your daughter sounds like a remarkable woman." "She is." Dorothy's voice held absolute certainty. "And she's innocent. Those men who arrested her, they're the same kind who arrested me back in '63 for sitting at the wrong lunch counter. Different badges, same hatred." Marcus leaned forward. "Tell me about that time, if you don't mind." Dorothy's eyes took on a distant quality, but there was no confusion in them. "We were freedom riders," she said. "Came down here to register voters. The sheriff and his deputies, they beat my friend so bad that 2 of them never walked right again." Her fingers touched the cross at her neck. "I wanted revenge. Wanted to hurt them the way they hurt us." "What stopped you?" "Pastor Williams. He sat me down in his office and quoted Dr. King to me. 'Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that.'" She smiled, a soft, knowing expression. "I didn't believe him at first. Thought it was weak to forgive. But then I realized, love isn't weakness. It's the hardest, strongest thing you can do." Marcus felt something shift inside him. He'd been carrying so much anger, so much cold fury at what these corrupt officers had done. It had fueled his investigation, driven him to take this risky undercover assignment. But Dorothy's words touched something deeper. "Did it work?" he asked quietly. "The forgiveness?" "Some things changed. Some didn't. The arc of the moral universe is long, young man, but it bends toward justice." She fixed him with a penetrating stare. "Are you a man of faith, James?" The question caught him off guard. Marcus had been raised in the church, had prayed before every major operation of his career, but lately his faith had felt more like a formality than a foundation. "I'm working on it," he said honestly. Dorothy nodded as if that answer satisfied her. "Grace never stopped believing. Not when her father died, not when I started forgetting things." Her voice wavered slightly. And she won't stop now. That's who she raised to be. Over the next hour, Dorothy shared stories that Marcus's FBI dossiers could never capture. She talked about organizing voter registration drives, about nights spent in jail cells singing hymns to keep their spirits up, about watching Birmingham burn and Montgomery march and Selma bleed, and still choosing hope. "You see patterns when you live long enough," Dorothy said. "The faces change, but the fight stays the same. Grace wrote a letter to the county commissioners asking why police got new equipment while our school couldn't afford art supplies. 2 weeks later, they arrested her. Marcus's hidden recorder was capturing every word, but he didn't need technology to remember this." "Did she tell you that?" "Didn't have to. I've seen this story before." Dorothy's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass. "They always go after the ones who speak up, the educated ones, the ones who refuse to bow down." Gladys quietly excused herself to make tea, leaving Marcus alone with Dorothy. "You're not just a volunteer, are you?" Dorothy asked suddenly. Marcus's pulse quickened. "Ma'am, you carry yourself different, like someone used to giving orders, not taking them." She tilted her head. "But that's all right. Whoever you really are, you're here for a reason. I can feel it." He chose his words carefully. "I want to help Grace. Then help her by helping all of them. Grace wouldn't want justice just for herself. She'd want it for everyone those men have hurt." Dorothy's eyes grew distant, the clarity beginning to fade like fog rolling in. "Everyone they will hurt." "Miss Dorothy?" Marcus reached out, concerned. She blinked, and the sharpness returned for a moment. "Sometimes my mind wanders," she said softly. "Alzheimer's. Grace takes care of me, but soon I won't even remember her name." A tear slid down her weathered cheek. "That's why this trial terrifies me. What if I forget her before she comes home?" The raw vulnerability in her voice cut through all of Marcus's professional detachment. This wasn't just a case. These were real people with real lives being destroyed by a corrupt system he'd sworn to protect them from. He spent another 30 minutes with Dorothy before Gladys drove him back to the community center. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Back at the halfway house that night, Marcus sat on his thin mattress with his burner laptop, reviewing the preliminary findings his team had compiled. The financial records told a damning story. 17 cases over 3 years. All black professionals, teachers, nurses, small business owners, a city councilman. All arrested by the same cluster of officers. All bailed through the same bondsman, Earl Whitcomb. All sentenced to private prison facilities that paid per inmate. The money trail connected Whitcomb to Shane Carver and Rick Dawson through shell companies and cash payments. It connected Walter Gaines, the county administrator, through campaign contributions and personal loans. The conspiracy was wider and deeper than anyone had suspected. Grace was victim number 18. Marcus pulled up her arrest report. The narrative was identical to the others. A routine traffic stop, a furtive movement, a search that allegedly turned up methamphetamine in the glove compartment. No witnesses except the arresting officers, no video footage, just their word against hers. And the system believed them every time. His phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Jennifer Chen. "Warrant approved for Grace's jail visit under community advocate cover." He exhaled, feeling the familiar mix of exhaustion and resolve settle over him. Tomorrow, he would put on James Washington's quiet face, walk into that cell block, and sit with Grace, listen, document, and do whatever he could to make sure her story didn't end there. For Dorothy, for Gladys, for the children who needed paint and teachers, and for every other name on that list, he couldn't let the system have the last word. The county jail smelled of bleach and despair. Marcus sat on the hard plastic chair, his hands folded on the narrow metal shelf in front of him. Through the thick plexiglass he watched the steel door on the opposite side of the visitation room, When it finally opened, Grace Robinson shuffled through, her movements slow and careful. The orange jumpsuit hung loose on her small frame. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. But when she saw him, a faint smile touched her lips. She picked up the phone on her side. He lifted his. "Mr. Washington," she said softly. "You came." Marcus's throat tightened. "I told you I would." Grace lowered herself into the chair. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the phone. "You didn't have to. I know you've got your own troubles." "My troubles are over," Marcus said. "The judge dismissed my case, remember? I'm here for you now." She studied his face through the scratched plexiglass. Something in her gaze made him feel exposed, seen in a way he hadn't expected. "You're different from most folks who say they want to help," she said. "Your eyes are sad, like you've carried something heavy for a long time." Marcus shifted in his seat. This woman was supposed to be broken, terrified, yet here she sat, reading him like a book. "I want to ask you about your case," he said gently. "About what happened the night you were arrested." Grace's smile faded. She looked down at the counter. "They pulled me over on Highway 49. Said I was speeding, but I wasn't. I'm always careful. I had Mama in the car, and she gets upset when things feel wrong." "What happened next?" "Deputy Dawson came to my window. He was polite at first, asked for my license and registration. Then Deputy Carver showed up." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Everything changed. Carver said he smelled marijuana. I told him that was impossible. I don't use drugs. I don't even drink." Marcus wrote notes on a small pad, though every word was being recorded by the device hidden in his shirt button. "Did they search your car?" "They made Mama and me stand on the side of the road. It was cold that night. Mama was confused, asking me over and over what was happening." Grace's eyes grew wet. "They searched for maybe 10 minutes. Then Carver came back with a plastic bag. He said it was methamphetamine. He said he found it under my driver's seat." "Where was your mother during this?" "In Deputy Dawson's car. He'd put her there because she was getting agitated." A tear rolled down Grace's cheek. "I was screaming that they were lying, that somebody planted that bag, but they just laughed. Carver said, 'Maybe you should have thought about your mama before you decided to write that letter.'" Marcus's pen stopped moving. "What letter?" Grace wiped her face with her sleeve. 3 weeks before they arrested me, I wrote to the county commissioners. There was an article in the paper about the police budget. They were asking for more money for equipment and overtime, but I'd been working with kids at the community center for 5 years, and we can barely afford art supplies. Our roof leaks. We don't have heat in the winter. "So you question the spending?" "I just asked if maybe some of that money could go to programs for children instead of more patrol cars." Grace's voice was small now. "I thought it was my right as a citizen. My duty, even." Marcus set down his pen. He wanted to tell her the truth, that he knew exactly why she'd been targeted, that he had evidence of 17 other people destroyed for similar acts of courage, that he was going to burn this whole corrupt system to the ground. But he couldn't. Not yet. "Grace, I need you to stay strong," he said. "Your trial is coming up, and I'm not sure I can do this." The words tumbled out in a rush. "They've already decided I'm guilty. My lawyer is 23 years old and fresh out of law school. He keeps talking about plea deals. 5 years if I admit I had a drug problem." "You can't take that deal." "I know." Grace pressed her palm against the plexiglass. "But Mr. Washington, every day I'm in here, Mama is in that nursing home, confused and scared, wondering where I am. The staff says she cries for me at night, and I can't go to her. I can't hold her hand. I can't tell her it's going to be okay." Marcus placed his hand on his side of the glass, matching her gesture. The barrier between them felt insurmountable. "How do you keep going?" he asked. Grace was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier. "Do you know Romans 8:28? Marcus nodded slowly. His grandmother had made him memorize it as a boy. and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him," Grace recited. "I believe that, Mr. Washington. Even in this, even in here, I have to believe there's a purpose." "You can believe that, after what they've done to you?" "I have to." She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "Because if I start hating them, if I let bitterness take root, then they've won. They've taken more than my freedom. They've taken my soul." Marcus felt something crack open inside his chest. For weeks he'd been running on cold calculation and controlled rage. He'd justified letting Grace suffer by telling himself it was for the greater good, that taking down the entire network mattered more than one person. But Grace wasn't just a case number. She wasn't collateral damage in a federal investigation. She was a woman of profound faith and dignity, teaching him lessons he'd forgotten in his climb to the top of the FBI. "Do you pray for them?" Marcus heard himself ask. "For the men who did this?" "Every night," Grace said simply. "I pray that God softens their hearts, that they see what they're doing to people, that they change." "What if they don't change?" "Then I pray anyway. That's not my burden to carry, whether they change or not. My burden is to remain faithful, to love my enemies, to trust that God sees everything and that justice, real justice, will come in His time." Marcus looked down at his hands. "That takes more strength than I have." "Then ask for it." Grace's voice was gentle. "That's what I do every morning when I wake up in this cell. I ask God for the strength to get through one more day, and He gives it to me, every single time." The guard tapped on the door behind Grace. "2 minutes," he called. "I need you to promise me something," Marcus said urgently. "What?" "No matter how dark it gets, no matter how hopeless it seems, you keep fighting. You don't give up. Can you promise me that?" Grace studied him with those clear, perceptive eyes. "Why does this matter so much to you?" "Because I failed you," Marcus thought. "Because I could have stopped this and I didn't. Because I'm not sure I can live with myself if something happens to you. Because this world needs people like you in it," he said aloud. Grace's smile was sad and knowing. "I'll do my best, Mr. Washington. That's all any of us can do." The guard opened the door. Grace stood slowly, cradling the phone. "Thank you for coming," she said. "It means more than you know, having someone believe me." Marcus watched her shuffle back through the door. When it clanged shut, he sat alone in the visitation room for a long time, staring at the empty chair on the other side of the plexiglass. His phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer Chen. New intel. Deputies bragging about school teacher being their biggest catch. They're planning something. Meet at safe house. Marcus stood and walked out into the bright afternoon sun. The pieces were falling into place. Rick Dawson's daughter, Kayla, had made contact through a community center volunteer. She wanted to talk. She had information. But as Marcus drove toward the safe house, Grace's words echoed in his mind. "In all things, God works for the good of those who love Him." He'd stopped believing that a long time ago. He'd seen too much evil triumph, too many good people crushed by systems designed to destroy them. But Grace believed it, even now, even in that cell. And somehow her faith was holding up a mirror to his own soul, showing him what he'd lost along the way. The safe house was a nondescript apartment on the edge of town. Jennifer Chen was waiting when he arrived, her laptop open on the small kitchen table. "We got another recording," she said without preamble. "Carver and Dawson at a bar last night, celebrating. They mentioned Grace specifically." She hit play. Shane Carver's voice crackled through the speakers. "That teacher thought she was so smart, writing letters to the commissioners." "Well, she ain't so smart now, is she?" Rick Dawson laughed. "Biggest catch yet. Educated, respectable, whole community loved her. Taking her down sends a message." "Damn right it does. Stay in your lane or we'll put you in a cell." Jennifer stopped the recording. Her jaw was tight with anger. "They're not even trying to hide it anymore," she said. "They think they're untouchable." Marcus leaned against the counter. "What about Kayla Dawson?" She reached out again. "Says she has physical evidence. A diary where she's been documenting her father's statements for the past year. She wants to meet." "When?" "Tomorrow. She's scared, Marcus. Really scared. But she wants to do the right thing." Marcus closed his eyes. Rick Dawson's daughter. 15 years old, caught between love for her father and horror at what he'd become. Another life shattered by this corruption. "Set up the meeting," he said quietly. "And Jennifer, Grace's trial is in 3 days. We need to be ready to move." "We will." Jennifer closed her laptop. "How was she?" "Grace." Marcus thought about the woman on the other side of the plexiglass, and about the promise he'd just made to her. Finally, he answered. "Marcus!" Jennifer's voice was close to breaking. "Status?" He gathered himself. The chapel was quiet except for the faint hum of the hospital beyond the walls. "What's her condition?" "She's stabilized," Jennifer said. "They got her to surgery in time. The doctor says she's alive, but—" Her breath hitched. "But it's touch and go. Director, the press is already getting the packages we sent. The arrests are set to go in 20 minutes. What do you want us to do?" Marcus felt the weight of the room press on him. Images spiraled through his mind. Grace's neat handwriting, Dorothy's cracked voice at the vigil, the children's faces. All of it had been collateral damage in his plan. He felt emptier than he'd ever imagined possible, and yet something like clarity cut through the haze. "Cancel the arrests," he said. The words surprised him with their steadiness. "Not because of optics, not to protect anyone, but because he swallowed. "This woman is more than a statistic. We secure the evidence. We detain where we must, but we do not parade people today. We make sure Grace is safe, and we make sure the case we present is unmistakable and humane. No headlines at 9 that paint her as less than she is." There was a long silence. Then, quietly, Jennifer said, "Understood. I'll call it down the line." He lowered the phone and looked at the cross on the chapel wall. For a long moment he simply stood there, palms pressed together, the breath he drew loud in his own ears. He had built a career on certainty and control. What he had not anticipated was the cost, measured in wholeness and lives rather than in convictions and statistics. He thought of every underline and margin note he'd made over 2 decades, every cold calculus that had justified delay or deception for the sake of a bigger net. He thought of Grace's words, "The shame is too much," and felt each syllable like a summons. "Tell Dorothy," he whispered to no one, "that I'm sorry. Tell her I'm coming." He left the chapel with slow, deliberate steps. The corridor's fluorescent light felt harsher now, but the world beyond it was the same. Hospital staff moving with purpose, a father comforting a child in a waiting room, the distant murmur of a newsfeed somewhere else in the building. Marcus Freeman straightened his shoulders the way he had when he first pinned on his stars, not as an armor, but as a responsibility. Outside, the sky was collapsing into day. He breathed it in, cold air filling the hollows left by grief, and walked toward the ICU, toward Grace and toward the work he had failed at, but was not yet too late to redeem. The morning light streaming through the hospital conference room windows felt harsh and revealing. Marcus sat across from Kayla Dawson, watching the teenager's hands tremble as they clutched her father's diary. The time for lies had ended. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew his wallet. With slow, deliberate movements, he opened it and placed it on the table between them. The gold shield caught the light. "My name is Marcus Freeman," he said quietly. "I'm the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Kayla's eyes went wide. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked from the badge to his face and back again. "You're not, James?" "No, ma'am." A sound escaped her throat, half laugh, half sob. "You've been here the whole time. Watching them. Recording everything. Yes. She pushed back from the table, her chair scraping against the linoleum. For a moment, Marcus thought she might bolt. Instead, she paced to the window, her shoulders shaking. How long? Her voice was barely audible. 6 weeks undercover, but we've been investigating this department for 7 months. Kayla pressed her forehead against the glass. Grace almost died because you were gathering evidence. The words landed like a blow. Marcus didn't flinch from them. Yes, he said, that's the truth. I made choices I'll have to live with for the rest of my life. She turned to face him. Tears streaked her cheeks, but her eyes were fierce. Are you going to arrest my dad? Yes. Good. The word came out strangled. She returned to the table and pushed the diary toward him. He bragged about it, about Grace, about the others. He said they were getting what they deserved for getting uppity. That's what he called it. Uppity. Marcus opened the diary carefully. The handwriting was neat, precise, a stark contrast to the ugliness of the words recorded there. Dates, names, conversations overheard at the dinner table, a teenage girl's horror at discovering who her father really was. There's something else, Kayla whispered, something you don't know yet. Marcus looked up. Dad and Shane. They keep evidence they plant. At Shane's hunting cabin. Photos, receipts, everything. Dad said it was insurance in case someone turned on them. Her voice cracked. He showed me the location once. Thought it was funny, teaching his daughter how the real world works. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. A physical evidence cache? Irrefutable proof? Can you show us where it is? I'll do better than that. I'll testify. Kayla's hands had stopped shaking. I'll tell a judge everything. I'll tell the whole world what they did, what my dad did. It won't be easy. People already judge me, she interrupted. I'm Rick Dawson's daughter. I see how they look at me at school. I hear the whispers. She met his gaze directly. But if I stay silent, I'm just like him. And I can't be that person. I won't. Marcus saw the same fierce courage he'd witnessed in Grace, in Dorothy. The kind that bent the arc of history. You're very brave, Kayla. I'm terrified. A tear rolled down her cheek. But Miss Robinson used to tell us in Sunday school that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right even when you're scared. Grace, always Grace, teaching even from a jail cell, even from a hospital bed. A soft knock interrupted them. Jennifer Chen stepped inside, her expression carefully neutral until she saw the diary on the table. Then her eyebrows rose. Director, Miss Dawson. She nodded to both of them. Grace is awake. She's asking for James. Marcus's heart twisted. He looked at Kayla. Would you excuse me? Agent Chen will stay with you. We'll get your statement recorded and then we'll arrange protection for you and your mother. Kayla nodded. Tell Ms. Robinson I'm sorry. Tell her I'm so sorry. You can tell her yourself when she's ready. But Kayla... Marcus paused at the door. You're not responsible for your father's choices. You're only responsible for your own, and you're making the right ones. The ICU room was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors. Grace lay against white pillows, her natural hair forming a halo around her face. She looked small, fragile, but her eyes were clear. Marcus approached slowly, hat in hand. James. Her voice was hoarse but warm. He pulled a chair close to her bedside. How are you feeling? Like I was pulled back from somewhere very dark. She studied his face. You look different, lighter somehow. Miss Robinson, Grace, I need to tell you something. She waited, patient as always. My name isn't James Washington. I'm Marcus Freeman. I'm with the FBI. He watched her carefully. I've been undercover, investigating the department that arrested you. Grace blinked, once, twice, then, impossibly, she smiled. I know. Marcus felt the world tilt. You know? Not at first. But when you visited me in jail, when you looked at me—" She shifted slightly, wincing. "My mama always said I could see people's souls. You had too much authority in your eyes. Too much purpose. You weren't just a community volunteer. You knew, and you never said anything. I figured you had your reasons." Her smile faded, though I wondered, sometimes, in that cell, whether justice delayed was really justice at all. The words cut deeper than any accusation could have. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, and his voice cracked on the words. "I'm so sorry, Grace. I thought if I waited, if I built the perfect case, I could save everyone. But I nearly lost you. I nearly—" He couldn't finish. Grace reached out and took his hand. Her grip was weak but steady. "Do you believe in God, Director Freeman?" The question caught him off guard. "I did. Once. I'm not sure anymore. Do you know what I prayed for in that cell?" She didn't wait for an answer. "I prayed that my suffering would have meaning, that it would lead to something bigger than just my freedom, and I prayed for you. For me. For whoever was out there, trying to make this right. I prayed they'd have wisdom. I prayed they'd have courage." Her eyes glistened. "I prayed they'd remember that justice without mercy is just revenge in a robe." Marcus felt tears spill down his cheeks. He didn't try to hide them. "You were dying, and you were praying for me. We're all dying, Director. The only question is what we do with the time we have." She squeezed his hand. "So, what are you going to do with yours?" He thought of Kayla's diary, of the evidence cache, of 17 other victims waiting for vindication, of the whole corrupt system ready to topple. "I'm going to make sure everyone sees," he said. "I'm going to make sure they can't hide anymore. And I'm going to do it in a way that honors your courage." Grace nodded, satisfied. "Then it was worth it." "No," Marcus said firmly. "It wasn't. You should never have suffered like this. But I promise you, I'll make sure it leads to real change. Lasting change." She settled back against her pillows, exhausted. "My mama's here, isn't she? I can feel her. She's in the memory care wing. She's been asking for you. Tell her I'm okay. Tell her the arc is bending." Marcus stood, but Grace held onto his hand a moment longer. "When you arrest them," she said softly, "show them the same dignity they denied me. Show them what mercy looks like. Because that's how we break the cycle." He nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. As he walked to the door, Grace called out one more time. "Director Freeman?" He turned. "Thank you for not giving up. On the case. On yourself. On hope." 24 hours later, Marcus stood in the same courtroom where he'd been arraigned as James Washington. But now he wore his dress uniform, the gold FBI shield gleaming on his chest. Behind him stood a dozen federal agents. In the gallery, cameras from every major news outlet jostled for position. Judge Holbrook sat at the bench, her face pale but resolute. She'd been briefed that morning in her chambers. The shock had given way to quiet fury. The bailiff called the court to order. Marcus stepped forward, his voice carrying to every corner of the packed room. "Your Honor, I am Marcus Freeman, Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'm here to present evidence of a conspiracy to deprive citizens of their civil rights under color of law, involving members of the Magnolia County Sheriff's Department, county administration, and associated private entities." The courtroom erupted. Judge Holbrook's gavel cracked down hard. "Order! We will have order," Marcus continued. "We have documented evidence of 18 separate cases where innocent citizens were targeted, falsely arrested, and funneled into a for-profit incarceration system. We have audio recordings, video evidence, financial records, and eyewitness testimony." At the prosecutor's table, Shane Carver sat frozen, his face drained of color. Rick Dawson stared at his hands, trembling. Jennifer Chen, now in her full capacity as Assistant U.S. Attorney, rose. "The United States requests immediate arrest warrants for Deputies Shane Carver and Rick Dawson, bail bondsman Earl Whitcomb, and County Administrator Walter Gaines. Judge Holbrook didn't hesitate. "Granted, bailiff, take them into custody." The courtroom exploded again. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. As federal agents moved toward the defendants, Rick Dawson suddenly stood. His chair clattered backward. "Wait!" His voice broke. "Wait, please." Every eye turned to him. Shane Carver hissed, an angry sound as agents closed in. Deputies stepped forward and within moments had both men in handcuffs. As they were led from the courtroom, shutters popped and microphones thrust forward, the press clamoring for statements while the gallery buzzed with the first stunned notes of a long-awaited reckoning.